game.
They did it! They did it! They did it!
And they're going crazy. They're jumping on each other.
One of the most unbelievable finishes you will ever see.
And welcome to it. Thanks for being with us on Orioles Magic, the podcast. Brett Holder along with Jeff Arnold for another edition of the program. And Jeff, great to see you.
Brett, always great to see you, and excited for our conversation today with Chad Bradford.
Yeah, Chad Bradford, a sidewinding right-handed reliever, had a very long and productive major league career, came over to Baltimore as a free agent. Also, his character, his likeness featured in the hit movie Moneyball. So his legacy as a relief pitcher, a non-closer relief pitcher, will last forever.
He did it in an unusual way, and I'm going to be interested to get his take on some of the new rules that are maybe being put in place, such as the 3-batter rule, if he's concerned about the role of situational relievers going forward, because he was a very good one for a number of teams for a very long period of time. And as somebody that he was probably wondering if he was going to make his high school team, let alone make the major leagues. I'm sure he had detractors the entire way, and that'll be something that we'll get into him with as well. Like, you put up good numbers in the minor leagues, but you do it differently and in an unusual fashion. And can that end up hurting you? And did he find that that was something that how did he get past that? And was it just the numbers that eventually allowed him to take the next step and pitch in the big leagues, or what was sort of the way that he finally was able to break through some of the doubters? So I'll be interested to talk about that with him, but a guy that did it in an unusual way, but a very successful way for a really long time.
Yeah, and I think everyone's kind of path and trajectory to the big leagues is an interesting story and background. He got a multi-year, pretty lucrative free agent contract as a non-closing relief pitcher in a time that just didn't happen very much. I mean, it's pretty common now for teams to do that. He was someone like Darren O'Day in style before Darren O'Day, and he was similar in production. If you look at the numbers, he had many good years pitching for multiple, contending teams, especially with Oakland. So that didn't really happen with his time here. We'll also talk about an interesting walk-off win the Orioles had at Camden Yards back in 2007 against the Yankees, where he was the winning pitcher. But a lot to chat about with Chad Bradford. And joining us right now is former major leaguer and a former Oriole for a couple of seasons. Right-hander Chad Bradford joins us on Orioles Magic, the podcast presented by Miller Lite. Chad, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. Glad to be here.
Well, let's settle one thing first. Would you describe yourself as a sidewinder, a submariner? How would you call your pitching style?
Definitely submariner. Now, early on in my career, I was a sidearmer. When I first was dropped down through the college years and minor league years, a little more of a sidearmer. But through my major league career, the bulk of it, almost all of it, I was a submarine guy for sure.
Do you have any funny stories about when you kind of went to Submarine and maybe something that went wrong? Because it's probably pretty difficult, I'd imagine, when you start to be trying to throw strikes from so low.
Well, I was dropped down when I was in high school. I was about 15 years old, and I threw strikes, but it was straight. So my coach said, "Hey, you're going to get crushed. We got to make a change," which I did. In the beginning, I was sidearm with the fastball, and I could throw a curveball at the top, but I didn't know how to throw the curveball down low yet. And so I would be fastball, sidearm, curveball at the top. But it was high school, so I was able to get away with it a little bit. But I do remember a funny story. When I was in Double-A, I was a little bit below sidearm. And our pitching coach was Steve Rinko. Remember Steve Rinko pitching the big leagues through the, I want to say 60s, 70s, maybe Expos, not sure.
Yep.
So I had Steve Rinko, and we're in Double-A Birmingham. And he said, "Man, you're big, tall guy. Let's throw a bullpen over the top." And I was like, "Man, I hadn't done that in years, but I'll try." So we go to the bullpen. I throw it over the top, and he says nothing. He's just sitting back like this. And I'm throwing breaking balls and change-ups and everything. And I get done, and he says, "Chad, never do that again." Okay. I'll stay sub.
I have to ask, Chad, I've always wondered this. how do you throw secondary pitches from the side or down under? I mean, I'm trying to think about the mechanics and math of it. How do you do it without a full demonstration?
Look, I'll tell you this. The slider down there is basically a curveball over the top, but you just drop your arm angle. That's all it is. I mean, everybody says slider, but really it's a curveball. You spin it like a curveball. The changeup was a little more tricky. I really had to work on the changeup and get that grip. But look, I tried to throw a cutter. I tried to throw a split. I tried a knuckleball, everything. And after all of that, through the process, it came down to fastball, slider, changeup was all I could really master from down there. It takes a long time to get those things for sure.
You had an extended big league career, but I'm sure because when somebody throws like you do, you're going to have doubters that don't think it's going to work at the major league level. How did you eventually prove them wrong?
I definitely had to continue to get outs over and over and over again. I didn't have the electric fastball that was upper 90s where pitching coaches feel like, hey, if he just gets to the big leagues, he'll succeed. I didn't throw that hard. Of course, I was sub, and so I had to continue to get outs at every level and show that I could do it over and over again, which wasn't easy because you had to be very consistent. You had to throw strikes. Don't walk anybody. Don't give up home runs. And that was one of the big things that, over my career that I tried to focus on. And Billy Beane even said it when I was in Oakland. He said, you can't hit a ground ball over the fence. So, get ground balls, don't walk anybody, don't give up jacks, and you'll be okay. And so that was kind of my philosophy over the years is no home runs, no walks. Let the rest take care of itself.
You pitch in the big leagues for 12 seasons, and I want to get into a lot of that in your time with the Orioles. But also, the theory always was, at least is what you heard growing up, that if you came from the side or down below, it's less stress on your arm, on your elbow, on your shoulder. Is that true, Chad, health-wise?
I would say maybe a little less stress on the shoulder. Elbow, it's the same, and it's even more on your back. It does put stress on your shoulder, but maybe it's a little less because you are down low. But I'll never forget. Art Howe stopped me in the clubhouse when I was in Oakland, and this was about 2002, and he said, since you're Submarine, you can pitch every day, right? And I was a young guy, and I was like, yes, sir. And I'm thinking, maybe I shouldn't have said that, But it's not necessarily true that you can pitch every day. It is a little less stress on the shoulder, but, man, it really does tax your back, no doubt.
What did some hitters say to you when they were trying to face you for maybe the first time or even a couple of times they hadn't had a whole lot of success? What were some of their reactions to the way that you pitched?
Early on it was, where's the ball coming from and where, having a hard time picking up. Everybody looks for that little box where the ball's going to come. And usually it's here for a guy over the top, right at his shoulder. But for me, they had to look at the dirt. I remember Kevin Millar telling me, he's like, man, when I would face you, I had to look at the ground for release point. And he said that was so strange. And, another thing was even though I was throwing 80, 82 to 85, I guess, somewhere around there, sometimes less, hitters would tell me it looks like it's 90, 92 because of the deception and the arm angle, and he just gets on you quick. And so that helped.
A lot of people talk today, perhaps because of the book and the movie and your role in it, which I do want to get into, that the Moneyball era created specialization in the bullpen or the one inning guy, the really good and importance of relief pitching before the closer. And it's just not true. You go back to you and it really, extends before even your era, but you did. And a number of guys in your era cashed in on some nice free agent multi-year deals at a time when, one inning relievers were not closers, were not getting those kinds of contracts. And you got in a one-off season, the Orioles bring in Chad Bradford, Jamie Walker, Danny Baez, all got really nice contracts to not necessarily be that ninth inning guy. And nowadays you're seeing, $10 million per year deals for some of those seventh and eighth inning guys.
Oh, it's amazing. I look at it now and I wish I was still playing. Because you look at these deals that are floating around. But, back in those days, it was a big deal that particular year because we're talking about, Jamie Walker and Baez with the Orioles, and then Justin Spire signed, and he signed first. And so he kind of set the bar that year. And we were all very excited because there was a group of relievers, 5 or 6 guys that were we're all about the same. I think Spire maybe closed some games a little bit early on, but once he set that bar, we're all like, hey, we're going to do good in this market. But nowadays it's exploded. I mean, it's amazing. And that's, I guess that's the way it goes. 10 years before me, a relief pitcher wasn't making a whole lot. And then 10 years after me, they're making more. So it's just kind of evolution. But it has become more important to have a relief pitcher that can lock down those innings and you feel comfortable, especially where the game's going now with pitching.
Do you have any concerns about the 3 batter rule at all, which is supposed to be new for the 2020 season?
Okay, don't get me started. I'm totally against it. It's not baseball. I don't understand why they're adding all these rules. I know the games are longer, but it's part of the strategy. If you're going to bring a guy in to face one hitter and you got that guy in your bullpen and you're willing to burn him for one hitter, I think you should be able to do it. That would have affected the way I pitched in my career for sure. Because there were times where I would get extended for a couple innings, but there were times where I came in and faced like 2 batters or 1 batter and get out of something. I'm more for the pure game. Let's not change it. Let's keep it the way it is. And if you love it, you love it.
Chad, this is a random one. When you are having a catch right now, are you doing it from the side or down under, or are you doing an overhand, over the top?
Well, I have 3 kids, but they range in age 25 to 10. So 25, 20, and 10. My oldest son, he had his career, so we throw a little bit, but I'm mainly throwing with my youngest son, who's 10 years old, and it's almost every day. And so I start off over the top, make sure he's the ball running in a little bit. But for the most part now, I'm throwing over the top because I'm throwing BP to 10-year-olds now. I don't want to hurt their confidence,
Hard enough to hit for a 10-year-old over the top at 75, 80 miles per hour, I'm guessing. To do it from the side would be unfair.
Every now and then I'll drop down and throw one. The kids are, "Oh, what was that? Do it again, Coach Bradford." But, hey, I can't do too many because something will break. Something will go wrong. The back, the knees, the whatever, elbow. It's rough getting older.
When you were with the A's and it's the Moneyball era and all those people are coming in and they're maybe providing you information that you've never gotten previously, what was some of your reactions to that?
Early on with that, I know Rick Peterson was my pitching coach in Oakland, and he was kind of ahead of the curve with a lot of this. And so I kind of tried to absorb all that information because I needed that. I needed as much information as I could get because I was not overpowering. I needed every advantage I could possibly get. And so he kind of tailor-made my, pitch sequence or, how I faced hitters, my plan, righties and lefties and how we're going to face them and how to pitch them up and in or down and away or soft and hard and all that. So I pay attention to as much as I can. There's much more information now than there was when I was coming through. I remember early on it was just watching video. If you watch video, man, you were ahead of the curve. But that was way back. Now there's so much out there. I can imagine being in a big league clubhouse and all the information that's being thrown at you.
Chad, your likeness is in the movie Moneyball. Do you remember the actor who played you?
Yes, Casey Bond. Actually, Casey came through Jackson about a year and a half ago. Gave me a call and said, "Hey, you want to meet for coffee?" And so I went and we had a nice long couple-hour conversation and talked about the movie and talked about his career, and he's doing well. And it's funny you brought that up because we actually had a chance to meet in person a little while back.
Cool. It's really cool.
When you saw the final product, did it resemble what it was like in Oakland?
I think overall it was pretty close. There were a lot of small details that were off. We didn't pay for our sodas out of the machines. They were free. That was one part I was like, we can't pay. And I will say there was a part in spring training where I threw a pitch over the catcher's head by like 15 feet. That never happened. Okay, strike that. Never happened. There were a few small things that were off, but I will say the one thing that kind of bothered me a little bit was Art Howe was a really, really nice man. Art Howe was a great guy. I love playing for him. And the movie made him kind of seem a little different than that. And so that was the only part I was like, Art wasn't that way. He was a good manager, took care of his players, loved his guys. But other than that, I think the basis of the movie was pretty close.
What was your relationship like with Billy Beane? Did you have one
Great.
as a player, general manager?
Yeah, great. Billy was I always felt like he was on my side. I remember there was a time in 2004 where I was kind of struggling a little bit, still getting plenty of ground balls, but they were finding holes, and my numbers were inflated. And we were in Anaheim, and he pulled me aside. He said, "Man, stop worrying." He said, "I can tell you're worried right now. You're kind of panicking, He said, "You're fine. You're getting ground balls. Just keep doing what you're doing. The same old, hey, you can't hit a ground ball over the fence. There's no home runs coming from a ground ball, so keep doing what you're doing and keep plugging away. You can be fine. We're happy with you." And it gave me that confidence to go, hey, the GM's telling me that, I can relax and go pitch. Because, through a major league season, you're going to have ups and downs, and you're going to have times where you feel like, man, have I still got it? What's going on here? Have I lost something? And he gave me that confidence to keep going.
What was it like watching Hudson, Mulder, and Zito? Because since the turn of the century, that's probably one of the best starting rotations that's been out there.
Oh, those guys, they were young, and they didn't know how good they were, really. They were just going out there every 5 days and getting after it. And you had different personalities. Huddy was a bulldog, man. He got after it. And then you had Zito, who was just a free spirit. If it felt right, that's what he's going to do kind of guy. And then Mulder was just such a good athlete. He could do anything. He was one of the best golfers around. And he was just so talented that, you could probably show him a pitch, and 2 days later he's throwing in the game kind of guy. So it was pretty impressive watching those guys. And to look at Moneyball, it's like, hey, it was Moneyball, but what about Hudson, Mulder, Zito? And it didn't say much about them in the movie. Those guys carried the team through. And plus, we had other guys like Corey Lytle was there for a little bit, helped out. Aaron Harang was around, Eric Hilius, and there were some other guys that started, Rich Harden. And it was a great staff. We had a pretty good bullpen there too. But those 3 starters really carried us.
Yeah, I was going to say pretty good bullpen too. I have to ask you about this, and I want to make sure I get this right. Chad Bradford, 24 postseason games, 1 earned run to a .39 ERA. That has to make you feel pretty good to end your career with a .39 postseason ERA with that many games.
Oh, that was fun. That was my favorite time of the year. You love pitching the big leagues all year long, but when you get to the postseason, that was fun because it felt different. It felt like it's all or nothing. You got nothing to lose. You just go out there and let it all hang out, do the best you can. In that environment, it was hard to do sometimes. But looking back, that was pretty special. I'll never forget the 1 run I gave up. We're in Tampa and played in the Red Sox in the ALCS, and I leave a runner at third. And I come out of the game, and Dan Wheeler comes in. And I think he throws a wild pitch, and runner scores. And he comes back in the dugout. He knew. And he goes, "Dude, I'm sorry. That's on me. And I'm like, dude, he was upset, visibly upset. And I said, hey, it's okay. It's not, let's try to win this game. Don't worry about me. But looking back, that 1 run in all those appearances, that was fun. That was what that's the reason I was playing, is to be in those situations. But it takes a little while to get accustomed to pitching in the playoffs. I remember my first couple of years, I think it was 2000 with the White Sox and 2001 with the A's. And I was very nervous pitching in those postseason games. But after a while, you've done it a few years, you start to welcome that, and it feels like, man, this is where I want to be. And I think that's when you feel like you can really compete at any level. And, if it's the playoffs, it doesn't matter. That's where you want to be.
Individually, was there a hitter who was maybe really good that you enjoyed a lot of success against, that you took a lot of pride in the fact that you were able to get this individual out pretty consistently?
Yeah, I've looked at my son, my 25-year-old, he loves stats, baseball, all this stuff. So we look at a lot of stuff. And I guess it was probably Pudge. He was a great hitter, but for some reason, I think he only had 1 hit off me in his career. I don't know how many at-bats, maybe around 15 or 20. And so he was probably one Hall of Famer, that for some reason I was able to get out. Other guys, like a Jeter, I got Jeter out, but he got me a few times, and A-Rod's the same way, and Manny and all these other guys. But for some reason, I had good numbers against Pudge. But those guys that are Hall of Fame guys or borderline Hall of Fame guys, they're hard to get out. I mean, those guys, consistently, if Manny wanted to hit that day, you couldn't get Manny out. It just depended on if Manny was locked in or not, And so it was fun looking back and thinking about the guys you faced.
And we were reminiscing about a game you actually were the winning pitcher, end of the season. Yankees are in town trying to win a division title, but because the Orioles beat them on Friday, September 28, 2007, they had to settle for a wild card. You're the winning pitcher again. The Orioles force a blown save from Rivera and then win it in the 10th on a Melvin Mora bunt single. Do you remember that night, Chad?
I do remember that night. What stands out is when I came in the game, I faced Jeter. He hit a double in the gap, and then it was like, oh, it's a tie ball game. I got to go to work now. And along the way that inning, I think there was a couple intentional walks, and bases are loaded, and I think I have to get 2 outs with the bases loaded. I know the last hitter I faced was Giambi with the bases loaded, and that is not a fun thing to do because I play with Giambi and he can hit. And so somehow I wiggle out of that. But the craziest part was Melvin dropping a bunt down. There was 2 outs, right? Bases loaded, 2 outs, So I'm thinking, he had a lot of savvy there, or either he was just taking a chance. I'm not sure.
Was it surprising how much your team had success against a guy like Mariano Rivera? Because from going back and reading a little bit about it, that was the second time where you guys had scored 3 runs against him in an inning during the season, which that didn't happen a lot in Rivera's career.
I think maybe it came down to guys that had faced him a lot. Did somebody hit a home run that night off Mariano, the 28th of September, 2007? I don't have that in front of me or anything, but it seemed like somebody went deep. Not sure who it was, but I think maybe in our lineup.
Jay Payton hit a triple off Rivera.
Right.
And I think that was one of the big blows in that blown save.
Okay. I think it was just having some veteran hitters that had been around and knew how to face a guy like Mariano. Because you think about on that team, we had Aubrey Huff, who'd been around for a while, and Millar. Now, Nicky Markakis was young, but Melvin and Tejada and those guys were older. Ramon Hernandez has been around for a while. So we had some veteran hitters that knew how to put together a good at-bat.
And then I have to ask you, Chad, did your knuckles actually hit the dirt sometimes when you pitched?
Actually, yes. It probably happened 4 or 5 times in my career. And I remember each one of them because it was on SportsCenter one time. He hit his knuckles on the ground. And so a few times I would hit my knuckles on the ground. The ball would fly up on the backstop like 20 feet, something crazy. Because I would hit my knuckle and the ball would hit the mound and jump up. But you guys, do you remember Tony Batista?
Sure.
Yes.
It was, he was here.
Big wide stance.
Yeah. So I did it. He had the bat on the other side of his head. Okay, for a while, his stance. And so I hit my knuckles on the ground. The ball goes above the catcher. He never moves his bat from here. He just watches it. And it was just like, what is this kid doing? I was young. But there was a few times it happened, but the one time that really hurt was I'm facing Benji Molina in Oakland, and I throw him a sinker, and I scrape my knuckle, and the ball just stays flat, and it hits a home run dead center field. That's the one that hurt, But it happened a few times. Not a big deal, though.
What was it like watching a young Nick Markakis? Because he had a huge year in 2007, and then he made quite an impact in his first year, the year prior.
Oh, yeah. He was young, full of energy. And like I said, we had a veteran team, and he was one of the only young guys in the lineup. We had some young pitchers, but not the lineup. Fun to watch him and to see what he's done in his career. I mean, he has a lot of hits in his career. Doesn't he have more than 2,500, I think?
About that number, yeah.
Around there.
And so, So, I mean, if he can hold on, he's pushing 3,000 hits. I mean, it's amazing what he's done in his career and the longevity. And I hope he plays for another 6-7 years and gets 3,000. He reminds me of a Johnny Damon. I mean, Johnny Damon's got almost 2,800 hits, and he was that close. If we're saying 3,000 is a number where you're in the Hall of Fame, which I think it is.
It's a lot of base hits. Chad Bradford, we appreciate so much looking back, and you had an interesting career to say the least. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys. Really enjoyed it.
That was great talking to Chad Bradford. I think, Jeff, I've always been a sucker for this, and I'm not going to hide from it. I love the different perspectives of a baseball life and the different careers. I mean, here's a guy who pitches in 23 postseason games, pitches for 12 seasons, and he has this really interesting, unique journey in the game.
And a really interesting, unique delivery, which was a lot of his success. There, you think about Darren O'Day and what he's accomplished in his major league career, doing things in an unusual fashion. And Chad Bradford was sort of the forerunner to that, and having the guts when he was in high school to make the decision. I mean, I don't know how I would have handled it very well if my high school coach came up to me and be like, you're going to get hit around if you don't radically change your delivery. And then he went from sidearm to lower and lower and lower to sometimes his knuckles were hitting the ground. But there was something about him that was so effective and allowed him to make a really good living and have a lot of success in the major leagues for a long time. And maybe he kind of gets lost a little bit in the shuffle when you think about some of those A's starting rotations. But when you're thinking about Moneyball and some of the key pieces of those A's teams from the early 2000s, you're thinking about Chad Bradford. He carried the success from Oakland and eventually to Baltimore. We had a couple of really good seasons. You mentioned O'Day, who is one of the big reasons the Orioles had 5 really good years in a row where they led the American League in wins from 12 to 16. A guy with a similar story, not making his college team, finding himself as a sidewinder. He was probably a tick higher than Bradford was, but a name that I think some older Orioles fans remember, a guy by the name of Todd Froworth. He might have been, if it's possible, as low or lower than Bradford was, and he pitched in Baltimore in the early 90s. But it's not something you see a lot of, but you can understand how, especially for those who don't throw hard, it's something different. It's unique. It's something that other hitters don't plan for to face a lot. So when you see it, it's tough. Jeff, in your minor league broadcasting days, how many side armors or submariners did you see in the Carolina for many years calling those games? I would say probably a handful. Donnie Hart was the one that we had that stood out the most for me. And, when I asked Chad the question about trying to battle some of the skeptics and how did he eventually overcome some of those challenges, even as he put up good numbers in the minor leagues, a lot of those same things Donnie Hart battled. I mean, he was going to have to go level to level and prove himself, and eventually he did. And when he got to Baltimore, he had a lot of success at the very beginning. But there are a couple of different pitchers from other teams that I've seen. In fact, there was one who, my first spring training radio game that I did, I remembered him because he was pitching for the Salem Red Sox at the time, and his last name was Kelly. Its first name is escaping me right now as I talk about this, but he was somebody that was really funny. Is when he would come into the games, he would come into Men at Work's Down Under. So they would play the song because he was throwing from down under, and now he's and it was just one of those things. Like, that's how I always remembered him. But as far as minor leaguers in the Orioles system, Donnie Hart's the one that stands out the most to me, and he's had a modicum of success in some years in the big leagues. Yeah, once struck out Bryce Harper. Also, you almost never see something from the side if you're left-handed. So that's right. Really rare and really tough, I imagine, for a left-handed hitter. Jeff, before we say goodbye for this edition of Orioles Magic, the podcast presented by Miller Lite, I do want to mention the conference call the local Baltimore media was on for Trey Mancini on Wednesday this past week. And Trey was on the call, so was Orioles general manager Mike Elias. But just it's hard not to be blown away by Mancini's toughness, his positive energy and attitude, and his overall determination. I mean, I don't know. It's hard, especially in these days, to find something like that. There's a lot of very, negative stuff out there for good reason, but you're just blown away by Mancini. We read it a few days ago, and then to kind of see it for ourselves on that Zoom conference call was something else. He acted like he normally does. He's positive. He's upbeat. He was smiling. He, a lot of people I would think at that stage of it could be defeated and ask the why me, why now? Because as young as he is in his late 20s, it doesn't happen a whole lot. So, and he said it in the piece that there's some times where he's got his bad days and his girlfriend has to kick him in the butt a little bit, but there's still like that great energy that you got from him. And sometimes he can make you laugh. I mean, one of the things that he's doing while he's going through his treatments is watching The Wire in the office. And so he can find a way to make you laugh and uplift you. And I think he's already inspiring those who are fighting their own battles with cancer right now, because as he's going through it, he's very honest and open about where he is in his journey. And he's doing everything he can to get back as soon as he can. But for the time being, he's given a little bit of hope and inspiration to everybody else. Well said, and hard to quarrel with The Office and The Wire, those two in the high rankings of the Brett Hollander catalog, things I've seen many times and continue to watch on a regular basis. And it's good to know Mancini's got a good taste in television, and seems very optimistic about his baseball career moving forward, whether that's in 2020 or 2021, and certainly dreaming of a day to trot out to first base or right field in spring training or Camden Yards. And I think we all look forward to that moment, and hopefully we all get to enjoy it together. But Jeff, to me, that was really inspiring. And I don't mean that in a cheesy way. I mean that in a very real and sincere way from Mancini this week. And his teammates are fully behind him. The city is behind him. The organization is behind him. And I think it helps, too, that he has a dad who has been through it, and his dad in a really touching piece that was out on The Athletic today with Dan Connolly, talking about his dad saying that I would switch places with him in a second, but at least it's shown Trey that it's something that's beatable. And as he goes through his treatments, he'll have his dad with him to provide support. And he's got a great group of people around him, and everybody's supporting him throughout this journey. Well, Jeff, that does it for this edition of Orioles Magic, the podcast. You stay safe and well, and we'll catch up soon. Enjoy it, partner. We will talk to you next week. All right. This has been another edition of Orioles Magic, the podcast presented by Miller Lite. Thanks for being with us, and we'll talk soon.